Welcome to the GreatBase Tennis Podcast, episode 130. I'm Steve Smith, and we're very fortunate tonight to have a total package coach. We take a shot at his last name, Ilja Semjonovs. How do you say it?
I like that better, but it's Ilja Semjonovs.
Say that one more time.
Ilja Semjonovs.
Tell us how you spell that.
Again, like I said, the first time you said it sounded better.
But when you spell it, it's like one of our former guests. I was like, well, I'm going to get this wrong. Karina Murariu, she won Wimbledon doubles. And I spent time with Albin Murariu, really. But Albin would send his daughter out. This is when I was a tennis director at Seguso Bassett. I was there with Dave Anderson. And Karina, we were just charting matches for her. And I finally told Albin, let us do video. He goes, no. And I said, no, just you have to see it. Your daughter doesn't have to see it. The coach doesn't have to see it. But her coach, who later became her husband, had a Slavic name. And I could never pronounce it. So I just used to quickly introduce him as Andrew son of a bitch. and he would just laugh. So what language should we do this podcast in, Ilja? Should we do it in English? We could do profanity. English, but we're trying to stay away from that. English, profanity, Latvian, or Russian?
Let's try all four of them.
All four? I could only speak two of them. But no, our listeners, this guy's, again, total package coach. Could share so many things with you as we get going here. But tell us a little bit your tennis beginnings in Latvia, how you got to the U.S., and how you got connected to what we do.
Yes, again, first of all, thank you for having me.
And I apologize, I've never been able to say your last name.
No, this is it. I'm changing it. This is how I go now.
Semjonovs.
Semjonovs. There you go. Yes, again, thank you. Great to be here. Very honored. My beginnings in tennis. I was born in '84, so I started to play tennis around 5 years old. So doing the math, it still was Latvia was part of Soviet Union, so there's a system in there you could try out all the different sports basically. So I started with swimming and soccer and tennis and some gymnastics. Actually, how I saw the tennis first time, I went with my mother to vacation in Sochi, and I saw Kafelnikov's coach was working with some players in there, and he came up to me and he said, "Hey kid, do you want to play some tennis?" So after we came back from Sochi, the first thing that we came up to our club in Latvia that was right on the beach, and so that's how I started. And how it worked back then, if I got kicked out from musical school, that's how it worked on there. If you don't listen, you're getting kicked out. It's the same thing happened with swimming. I got kicked out. But tennis, I put up with coaching, and I put up because I love the sport. So I stayed in there. I wish I would have education that I have now, because there was not much education. We had a wall, and I would say that our education to play tennis was in the summer we would play on the clay courts, on a very bad clay court next to the beach. There was a lot of wind, and in the winter we didn't have tennis courts. We would play on wooden floors. The walls were very close to the baseline, so you would really have to adjust. So you would play two different styles of tennis in summer and winter. Yes, and going to 18, so I continued playing, and the opportunity came up to come to United States. I wasn't really familiar with United States colleges, but I got offered to go to Division II.
Let me interrupt right there, but stay with that college tennis. I guess I should say this. I'm wearing this hat because I'm a wimp for cold weather. I grew up in really, really cold weather in upstate New York, born in Potsdam, New York, almost as far north as you can go in New York State before you hit the Canadian border. I know Andy Fitzell, who started our podcast, he would be upset with this funny looking hat I have on, but Florida, it was cold 2 days ago. I'm still freezing. But here, I want to say this is a compliment, big time compliment. Ilja, you got to tell us why you got kicked out of music and why you got kicked out of swimming. But Ilja got kicked out of a fitness club. It was a beautiful fitness club, like these big commercial clubs right up the street. I think LA Fitness. I mean, I guess it's a commercial for them. And so be it. Those places are really nice. So it's very similar. It's in Mississippi, and Memphis borders Mississippi. It was $15, and you could not do any training. And almost every day for 21 months, I know it was a group who were there 24 months, went to this gym. And you could not coach because it was $15. So if just think a fitness trainer could say, okay, I'm going to get 10 clients and I'm going to take care of their membership. And so what I would do is I would basically reprimand the players before we went in and then after we came out. And I mean, I could just name the cast of characters where they're on their phone, pretending they're riding a bike. And I used to just do the weight training, which again, someone my age, is the best thing to do. And then afterwards, I would say, you guys, you got to be kidding me. You got to be kidding me. So I guess the first time, second time, third time, they finally came up to me and said, your assistant can no longer train here. And that's a compliment because Ilja cannot not coach. He's around these athletes and they're just messing up left and right. But tell us, and I want to come back to something that you've added that's so valuable to the GreatBase curriculum. I would think it ties into your music background, but go with swimming first. How'd you get the boot in swimming?
Well, with swimming, I guess it's just a little softness in me. I mean, the morning practices, it was just wearing off, and swimming in the morning, like 100 laps and 200 laps,
Are you swimming in a pool or?
In a pool, yeah. We had indoor pools. And that did not really stick with me, so did not really listen well.
But that ties into the former Soviet system too, because you weren't really paying for it. Your parents aren't writing a check, right?
Correct. That was, even when Soviet Union broke down, I remember our monthly bill for tennis was $10 a month.
$10 a month. I want you to come back to Latvia tennis and some work you're doing with them and tell us about, what the setting is there. But let's do that down the road a little bit in this podcast. But then what about the boot and music?
Boot and music.
But you have to have enough musical background to put this. I can never pronounce this either. The rhythmic, the cadence, the metronome.
Metronome.
Yeah, I struggle with that too.
That D is getting in there all the time. The dome. Metronome. No, I guess I was 6 years old too, and it was like a class was 4 to 5 students, and we were learning how to play fortepiano. But till now, I'm like what they say, the bear stepped on your ear, tone deaf. And I was a really bad kid back then, all the time getting in trouble in the kindergarten. And before every lesson, the teacher would kind of turn us away from the piano, and she would play a note, and we would have to guess which note is it. Is it do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, si. And one day she turns me away from the piano, and I'm facing this, I would say, the door that has a little shine to it, and I'm figuring out that I could see a little bit of reflection. So I'm start guessing. So 2-3 lessons in, so I'm not guessing, so I see what she's pressing. So she's thinking that I have this amazing gift, so she's pressing one note, she's pressing 2 notes at the same time, 3 notes at the same time. She's putting me in front of the class saying, this is it. So again, never get praised. So I was very happy that she came up to my mother and she's saying, okay, you guys have to come in next day, come in an hour before, or like 2 hours before the lesson, before the lesson. So we show up, she does the same thing, she puts me next to this shiny door, and I'm guessing everything, 3 notes, 4 notes, everything. She said, okay, I'll be back in 15 minutes. And it was a very prestigious musical school in our city. I mean, the most prestigious players and teachers were in there. So there's a whole school, I would say, teachers come in and sitting down in the auditorium to listen to this new Mozart, Beethoven. So she turns me right into this public, to this whole auditorium, and I don't see that reflection. She goes 1, 2. So I embarrassed her. She figured it out that was a reflection. So I was kicked out and was never allowed at this. So that was my story with music. But, I guess the metronome comes from there. So
yeah, why don't you share that with the listeners? It's fantastic how you put it together, the checkpoints, and you go 6, 7 segments, and then you accelerate it to 1, 2. And why don't you just touch upon that? We need to do a better job. It is on video, but we need to do a much better job. We'll put up an example on Facebook after this podcast comes out, but we need to film what you do. That's fantastic.
Yes, with a metronome. So basically, what metronome is, it's a what is it called? Beats per minute. And it's easier. The GreatBase system just makes it easier to put it in a system with a metronome, how you can go with the steps. Because I like to tell kids when we're starting with this metronome, for example, if we're going to go through the forehand volleys, it's going to be your song. If you're going to go to a piano teacher, how do you play a song? You have to break down the song in increments. Are going to be, let's say, 3 or 5 increments. In each increment, you have to master each increment. You have to master each note. So forehand volley becomes your song, and there are 3 increments. And in those 3 increments, you're going to go, okay, toes are going to be pointing the right way, your knees are going to be bent, the grips are going to be composite grip. So, and then when the number 1 is going to be a ready position, so you have to hit all those points correctly. Then number 2 hits, so you have to turn for the volley, and 3 is going to be a contact. So the same thing is going to go for the backhand. And we broke down ground strokes in 7 steps. So it's ready position, turn more, 3-point landing, contact, follow through, and then you're finishing up on 3H balance. And then how it goes is just to show the player, a student, how you can connect those dots and how can you make it out of this mechanical, and I would say those increments, making the whole swing, making out of the 7 steps to make just the 2 steps, just like to make a 2-part swing on the ground stroke. So we go from 7 steps, we're going to 5, we're going to 4, we're introducing breathing. You're breathing before the contact, and we're going to 3, so you're making 2-part swing. And while you're doing this, while you're setting up a metronome, especially on a slow speed, on a slow beats per minute, you can walk around, actually correct the player. And it's amazing how the student actually responds to the numbers that metronome throws out better than to you. If you would be counting, I feel like there's a little bit of a human element to it, and the student does not respond. And first of all, you won't be able to count it for we can do the session with a metronome for like an hour and a half. You're not going to be counting so long. So, and then going from a simple volley progression to ground stroke progressions, we can go to the serves. And we, like for example, today we did this serve and volley progression where you can actually create a point going by metronome. And at the same time, I can be changing the pace of it. So you have to be aware. Also, right away, it's almost like you could see on the player whose light bulb is on. For example, if it's a metronome going 1, 2, 3, and I see the players are, instead of being on the 2nd position, they're already on 3rd, I already know that the player switched off.
Yeah.
They're already on the autopilot. So you could right away see, you could have 30 players in the gym and you could see whose light bulb was on, whose light bulb was off.
Oh, it's so simple how you have it hooked up to your phone. You have a small speaker you travel with. But that's a great point that needs to be emphasized, that you can look at it and go, well, no, they're not even staying in beat. They're just, going through the motions. Right. And I like that expression, switched on kid. And if they're switched on, like you said, the light bulb's on, they're growing myelin at a faster rate.
Yeah. And you can see right away, I would like to start it slow, and every kid's brain is going 100 miles per hour. No, slow it down. It's like a yoga pose. Hold it. Own that position. And they just want to go. The brain just wants to be entertained and go forward. But metronome kind of allows that to slow it down a little bit and put it in, I would say, meditative state. And then you just grow from there. I mean, on the video, we could show it more, but...
No, so many stories. When I say total package coach, it means Ilja, whether it's concentration and what some things he does for that, the mental side, the physical side. But I remember with this NJTL nonprofit, you had a group of kids down in Miami, and one of the national coaches was very impressed with how your students were hitting the ball. And the national coach was very open. And I think that's one comment to make. I think obviously there's a lot of shots taken in this country with the USTA, like there is, I think, in every country. Andy Jackson, who coached at Florida for a long time, and he's been at several other schools in the SEC, just recently retired, and he had a lot of players from France. He said, typically players, no matter where they're from, they badmouth their federation. But I remember one of the coaches, and you showed that to them, And for our listeners, Ilya and his wife, they're based in Orlando, like 5 miles or less from the National Tennis Campus. What you have put together with that needs to be embraced by the leaders of American tennis. But I'm sorry, you go back. Anything else to add to that? If not, you can go back where I interrupted. You're talking about coming to the States.
Yes, that'll be, the story continues how I met you and how I got introduced to GreatBase. And I mean, we can talk about tennis, the ego, and layers of knowing, and you don't know, and do you learn something else? And just even spending, and right now over 4 or 5 years, that after I think we met.
No, I think it goes back a little bit longer as far as consecutive years, but as far as how long I've known you, it's been more than 5.
Yeah.
Coming upon your last names, though, one of your college teammates, Mukundan, how do you say his last name?
I'm first. You're going second.
That's a good call.
Mukundan Nandakumar.
Say that one more time.
Should I sing it?
Yeah, sing it.
Mukundan Nandakumar.
Yeah.
I think I'm pretty close.
Yeah,
So
I mean,
it's a great guy.
I think people should just you should only be given one syllable. First name 1 syllable, second name 1 syllable. That's probably one thing I got going for me. Steve Smith. But go ahead, Mukundan.
Yeah. So when I got to college, on the summers I started teaching a summer job, going to Julian Krinsky summer camps. And again, Mukundan, how I knew about it, because Mukundan and my coach Saresh, they were going and teaching in the summers in there. So that's how I got introduced to Julian Krinsky.
And as you know, Julian and his wife Tina, they were on a previous episode, which is great to talk to them.
Yeah, and again, talking about the ego, talking about being young and stupid, young and dumb, and again, that's again what would say the critics say. Now I will bring it up how I was teaching in the beginning. It's I've been on that other side, trying to be a YouTube flavor of the month and not getting anywhere. So when I was young, when I was in college, I know that you've been educating everyone, and I heard your name, and it's just even tough to say, but it's like, oh, it's old school. That's what it was going to my head, and went back, and again, no volleys. I grew up playing on clay, so everything is high. So it was all the grips are close, and after graduating, I decided that I want to coach. I enjoyed seeing improvement in kids, and just enjoyed being outside and working with kids and training and being around tennis. And again, like I said, going to YouTube for information. That's and being, again, egoistic, thinking that you know everything. You're just not seeing any results, and that's when you start searching for more answers, and you're trying to put your ego down, and it's like, okay, so where is it going? It's coming back to efficiency. And that's when I reached out again to Mukundan, and again I reached out how to get in touch with you. I started following the tennis intelligence supply. Was that course was put up, and then when I met you in Charlotte, North Carolina, that's when I completely knew I don't know anything. I don't know. And it's every year, actually. After that, going to Memphis, there's going to be a new layer. I didn't know. It's every year it was adding up. And it's amazing that just with the experience, just to see. It's like...
With our listeners should know that the first time you came to visit, I believe you just brought one student with you. But then you went home and you made some arrangements, and next thing you know, you were there to work as a volunteer.
Yeah. Yes. I quit my job in there as well, and that's when I actually started to teach kids in their basements, in the houses. And actually, that's when they started actually improving even more. And that's when this idea of warehouse training, that's where it's, and I couldn't pass by opportunity to come and actually learn from you in Charlotte. And that was...
I think the warehouse, we mentioned that with the Smiths in Indianapolis, where they used to use an old Home Depot. And I was just there to visit one time, but I understand now they have a new setting They have standard courts. But the idea of how you're up in New Jersey, so when you're thinking about going into a warehouse, just to make it where it's less costly.
Yeah, less costly. An idea was even just to have just to half of the court, just to educate kids. Basically, what FM training center has, just with a ball machine, half of the court, the wall, and you just filming them, showing them, educating them, showing them drills, and let them go in and just rent courts with the parents.
No, actually, for our listeners, if you're teaching technique, especially those people that own indoor courts, 7,200 square feet of lighted and heated space, and you don't really need a tennis court.
Correct.
You certainly want to have areas to work on athleticism. And I know you and I have done so many things with group dynamics where you can take the 7,200 square feet. We had a session with Richard Hernandez on group dynamics and just how you can set that court up. And it's very easy to have 24 people on that court.
Oh yeah.
Then the psychology of it, if you get the high level kids that come in, I hate the expression to buy in. I believe what you're doing. It's like, no, that's the wrong verb. It's gravity. It's physics. Do you believe in gravity? Yeah, I believe in gravity. But you actually never did that.
No.
Yeah.
That's
because
then
you, and at that point, I know my son Connor, I sold the real estate I had in Tampa, and that helped me fund his tennis. And Charlotte, I was working with a group of people that were considering building a facility, and I chose Raleigh, but that went on the back burner, and these people called me up. They had built a $5.5 million tennis facility, and we just went in and said, okay. And at that time, Matt Clore, who I know you spent so much time with as well, he was interested in being by his parents and being in Western Carolina. But we did that for a while, but we turned the culture around, and what took place there. I think of Lenny Schloss with Billie Jean. Say that?
Billie Jean King.
I could say her last name. Billie Jean King. I coach. Someone like that come in. It's all on film. How people were hitting the ball and what was being accomplished. But then some time elapsed. It wasn't very long, and then we did a project with Tennis Memphis, where we overlapped. Where I was there a little bit before you, and you stayed a few months after I left, for 24 months. But yeah, I appreciate saying the different amount of layers to it. What people should do is teaching pros, like say a director, a head coach. Perhaps they're too busy, but if they were to send an assistant coach, and they just can't come one time. It's just really a snapshot. Like Carla Navarro Wojcik, all these people in this greater Boca Raton, Delray Beach, Boynton Beach area. I've known her the longest, and she'll say that no 2 days are the same.
I agree.
No 2 days are the same. Of course, but people come in from the outside and they just get a snapshot of it. Before we came on air, we came on live, or I should say, we're not live. Chevy Chase. We're coming to you almost live. Wrong term. The story where this gentleman was recruiting one of our students from a Power 5 conference, and the father was nice enough to say, well, no, Steve Smith's his coach, and he said, no, I've watched Steve Smith coach tennis. The father goes, yeah, how long? He goes, 1 day. He goes, well, this is what it looks like 10 years later.
Yeah, that's a great line.
We just had a group of players at the beach, and a definition for comedy is tragedy with time. So young player comes down, we film him, and there's no connection, but he's in Orlando. And I said, well, here's Ilja's email, phone number, get in contact with him. And, then they live like on the other side of the city. And, this is so funny but it's not funny. It's just the opposite. So the dad goes, well, we've been through it. And you could help me with it really shouldn't sound like a punchline. I just started laughing out loud. It's just he goes, well, we want to do everything, but we want to keep the forehand a little Spanish. It is like, are you kidding me? WC Fields, there's a sucker born every minute. We're teaching the Spanish forehand. Well, no, we're teaching Spanish physics this week, and we're going to go to physics from Argentina next week. It's crazy stuff. Let's talk about athleticism. So you played other sports growing up. You've played so much soccer, pick up soccer with us. And all the kids, Ilja's the best. Ilja's the best. And you laugh.
No, right now. Don't broadcast it now. Come on.
No. The kids are saying that, but you come to me and go, I cannot even play soccer. I've always been a terrible soccer player. It's like one of our guests, Fergus O'Rourke, good Irish name, and Fergus is fast. He's left-handed. He says he can only play with one foot. He gets the same compliment from the players. Fergus is awesome. And Fergus goes, I haven't played since I was 12, and I can only use one foot. So relative. Watching some of the kids play basketball today, but I guess we could talk a little bit about your younger brother first, and then come back to just athleticism and some of your thoughts on what needs to be done with American junior tennis. Tell us about how much younger is Nils than you.
7 years. So he's 91 and I am 84. He was lucky that when he was born, they built a hockey hall right in our city. And as I told you before, how the Latvian system works, it still runs on this kind of Soviet system when they accepted all the kids in the area who wanted to play hockey. Just said, this is it. Everybody come in. And for a month, I believe, they were just, or maybe even more, they were just selecting kids.
And what was that? What was it based on? How did they choose hockey kids?
Everybody, they just get all the kids this age, this year. You guys are allowed. Everybody was allowed to come in for free and skate, and we'll teach you who's coachable, who's not coachable, who's doing things, and they were just weeding people out. That's
the old Soviet system. Basically, we're going to cater to the talented.
Yeah,
we're here in this side of the.
And the kids who wanted to stay, they would go out and actually would go on the pond and they would, practice in the summers. They would be just, but everybody was an athlete. Everybody would play soccer. My brother would play tennis in the summer, play soccer in the summer. Like my father, he was a professional soccer player. Our aunt, she was a gymnast, master of sport. And so he would do gymnastics as well. So.
Now I've seen your brother skate. He can fly. Tell us about his academic background.
Academic background, he finished his PhD in physical therapy. So right now, he finished, the beginning, he started in SUNY College in Canton. That's where he played some hockey for Canton. And then he moved to Utica College. That's when he finished his PhD. So now he's in Tampa. Actually, he's right now as the main physical therapist in Saddlebrook. In there. Also, he works with the owner of this group, the doctor of Tampa Bay Lightning, so he gets to work with some of the professional athletes like NHL players, baseball players, tennis players, golf players. So he's a busy guy right now.
Well, you and your parents did a great job. You and your brother are so giving. I know he donated so much time, free of charge. I know you've done so many things for players, even making donations for players. With athleticism, Dick Savitt, who played at Cornell, just 95, recently passed away. But when he played at Cornell, he played basketball too. Now here's a guy who, they're talking about him now, not only because he just recently passed away, but he passed away during the Australian Open, which he won. But he won Wimbledon. And he was really discriminated against for being Jewish. I had a chance to meet Angela Buxton, who, like Dick Savitt, was discriminated upon greatly. And she played with Althea Gibson, who even more so was discriminated against. But just the fact that he played basketball. Every kid, it's such an easy sport to get a ball and go, and you can do solo drills and do one-on-one. And I don't think you can necessarily learn tennis on YouTube, but just basketball drills. It's kind of like if a kid has one of those ladders, those plastic ladders for footwork, Now we make all these connections with people we know. Ty Tucker was a guest on our podcast. He hates those things. Because the people who really know fitness know that it used to come from American football, and they would get the big tires, and you got to really lift your legs up, not this little plastic ladder. But you could go to YouTube and say, okay, let me see how people do this and really do it well. But as far as athletes, I can't even pronounce his last name. I should, but he just won the doubles with his partner, and Jason Kubler, but Rinke. Should be able to pronounce his last name. And I knew his name. I had never really seen him play because when he was being recruited in Aussie to play at UNC, there was a player that I've had a lot to do with over the years that they were also recruiting. So I was their best friend for a short period of time. They're calling me up every day. But I just read this kid played 5 years of rugby, 8 years of swimmer, 3 years of soccer, and I may not be saying this right, but he took some special ocean swimming life saving. And it's like, we're really losing out with kids in the U.S. that don't play other sports. But why don't you comment on that as far as just being an athlete?
Yes, well, even digress a little bit. Again, my father being a professional soccer player, me being 5 years old. And again, the sports and everything which you did, and back, I guess, in the Soviet system, if you picking up tennis or you're picking up soccer, you are going to do your best. You're not just going in there as a curricular activity. If you want a curricular activity, you just go play with your friends, like a soccer. That's what I did.
Pick up soccer
or go play basketball. And everybody did that. Everybody stayed athletic like this. But I came up with my father to the first practice. It was five or six. And he saw me that for the whole hour, I'm coming off a field, 5 or 6. He looks me straight in the eye and he said, Ilja, you'll never be a soccer player. You don't see the field. You're not a team player. You got to be doing single sports. And I said, okay. And after that, I never stepped on a professional, I guess, developmental path, not professional, but developmental path to be a soccer player. This is it. I was in tennis, I was in swimming, gymnastics, but for my brother, he told my brother, okay, so you're going to hockey. My father loved hockey. If the rink would be there, he would play hockey as well. Actually, he continued playing hockey later in his life.
Great. I think it's the greatest spectator sport. A little biased, but I'll tell you a quick hockey story. I'm living in Toronto. I went to Toronto because my kids, I just took them ice skating so they become athletic, and then they go, I want to play hockey. I wasn't thinking hockey. So my youngest son, and I did steer. I remember Scotty Perelman reprimanding for this. I did steer my sons to call me Steve. Their grandfather was called Mike Moran. So they were calling me Steve, and with Connor, he comes out of the locker room, and he's like same thing, 5, 6 years old, and it says, Steve, what's it mean when the coach says we're effing pathetic? And I was just laughing. A little lack of interest. That's what apathy with.
No, I wish I would spend some time in hockey. We just were talking with my brother. It was my mom, my brother, and we were just talking about his stories when he was 10 years old and how his coaches were talking to them. And it's the book could be written in there. Just some stories that come out now, that's a little bit of fun.
No, my late mother she had a painting that was up forever, and it was a picture of a hockey bench, and all you could see is the top of the helmet. So the players were all young; they couldn't even see over the boards. If they're sitting on the bench, they couldn't see what was going on. And I was away from hockey for a long, long time. I was in it, number one passion, 15 years, and I'm away from it for like 20 years. And I just couldn't believe the profanity. You're coaching 6-year-olds, and you're just screaming. They're screaming and just dropping F-bombs at the ref. It's I've been told, and I know your brother thinks the same way, that the culture is not what it used to be.
Yeah.
Whatever was said in the locker room was sacred.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, the book that we have, a narrative, it's on our podcast, Journey to the Truth. There's a chapter on ice hockey, and it's true. It's kids in tennis, they don't know what a locker room is. Little kids in tennis, little kids in hockey, your parents can go in and tie your skates, and then the coaches go, all the parents out, and it's a good thing.
Yeah. The tying your skates, that was definitely, the kids were kicking parents out. I remember that. He was kicking me out. He's like, "You're not tying my ice skates."
Yeah, and
It's in there.
that's a myth with little kids. Hockey is all the little kids want their skates as tight as possible, and you find out the pros, they don't tie their skates tight. Just the opposite.
So yeah, going back to athletic again, like I said, even though I didn't have developmental path in soccer, but everybody played soccer out there. You're on the beach, you grew up on the beach, playing with your friends. Um, Going back to gymnastics, I think most of the biggest percentage of players from Latvia or post-Soviet Union, they have a little bit background on gymnastics. Even just a PE. I just remember my PE classes back in the school. They were a little bit different, I'm sure, than now.
Yeah.
Yeah, so everybody could juggle the ball and on their feet. I mean, it's the hand-eye coordination was just there. It's tough to right now when we're picking up, what you mentioned with the kids picking up a soccer ball. I mean, they're saying, "I want to play college." I ask, "Okay, how many times you can juggle the ball?" They're looking at me like I'm from a different planet. Like, you want to play college?
Yeah, there's a coach that I've had some fun with, been around here the last several weeks, and I just kept telling him Argentina's going to win. Because he loved me, because every time I would see him, Argentina's going to win, and they ended up winning. My son Connor was in Germany when the World Cup, and he was being played, and he just fell in love with soccer. He came back, and he just entertained himself on how many different ways he could pick a ball up. He became quite good at it. But I remember him saying, this is for the parents listening, so by no means was he a great soccer player, but we had Roberto Calla for 15 years, and Roberto, who's been on from Peru, he taught all the kids every day. He was like, "Okay, go play 20 minutes of soccer." I would have to just, game's over, guys, game's over. So he taught all these young kids to play soccer. And that's like anything, you got to do it every day. But I remember we always had a basketball hoop. And I just remember my son's going, I wish I learned to play basketball, because when he went to college, they'll do it for fitness and do it for fun. Mm-hmm. With American kids need, most college tennis teams are going to be 50-50, if not more foreigners. I mean, last year, 60% with the women, 62% with the men. And the kids are going to go out and play two on a side and play soccer with their feet. I've been in Germany so many times, other countries, but Germany, I would just entertain myself and get the four teaching pros assisting me. Go, "Hey, let me see you guys do this mm-hmm. drill on indoor carpet." They're doing the bicycle kick. I mean, it's amazing. And we Americans, even though the women have done so well, I mean, it's mm-hmm. interesting. People say we're so far behind in soccer when it comes down to coaching, but my generation, soccer wasn't a big sport. But on athleticism, pickup sports have gone away. I mean, how is that today in Latvia? What was it like when you're growing up?
Again, as I mentioned before, I mean, after every tennis practice, I remember coming home and I would play soccer in our neighborhood, and especially in the summers. In the winters, a little bit different, but still, even in the winter, we'd go and play soccer with a tennis ball on the cricket floors. I mean, it was a bloodbath out there.
Well, but today, I mean, I know you've been back, especially with the pandemic. What's it like now? Is it Americanized, where kids are on their cell phone and not?
That was actually fresh breath of air in there. Seeing actually kids are driving, biking themselves to the practice. I didn't see parents dropping them off. So that was. I mean, our town is very small, so there is still a lot of pickup games, and kids. I think kids are still more athletic, but I would say there was still a little bit of a drop. We can talk, of course, more about the system, what's happening now in Latvia. It still follows that Soviet system where there is. This is actually happening only in our town, Liepaja. For example, if you're going to go down in capital Riga, there is a lot of private clubs. So it's a lot of just for your own money, and you're just paying for private sessions and groups. But in our town, it's government funded, town funded actually. And every year, you're 6 years old, you go into a school, just like how you're going to your first grade in school. So it's called tennis school. And there's only, let's say, 100 open spots. and 300 trying to get in. So the politics of it, I mean, the system, we can talk more, and the infrastructure in there, I mean, it's a beautiful place. But the politics of it, right now, they're picking players only out of the hat who makes the cut for 100. And I think it's the biggest mistake. So while I wasn't there, was it 2 years ago, I said, you guys have to just make at least like a week of tryouts and just to see the hungry kids who want to go and play. I mean, just have a natural competition, natural selection. Just like how I talked about my brother going to a hockey, you want to keep the hungry kids. So
I like how you said that. You mentioned that to me earlier. Let's stay on that for a minute. Is not necessarily, who can jump the highest and who's going to run the fastest, but just the kids who, like, if you gave them take-home assignments and have a notebook and do this and do that and some extra practices and to find out who's motivated.
Correct, just the ones who are showing coachability, and it would go for a kid and for a parent, because again, sacrifice of a family and driven parents, driven kids. But the problem is they're creating those groups, and the group sticks with the same coach, let's say, going for 12 years. And their retention rate is really high, actually, in that school. If you're going to look at it, not a lot of kids are dropping out, but you have in your group 4 kids who want it. And 4 kids who don't want it, and 1 kid who wants it. So it's kind of disrupts that. It's not perfect.
That expression is not perfect. I mean, communism, socialism, capitalism, nothing's perfect. And I don't really like the system of take a private lesson. Throughout the U.S., people are being told, well, if you really want detailed instruction, you have to take it private. If you really want to improve, you have to take privates. And it's just too bad because, and there are many tennis teachers that they're not reaching a lot of people. They may be working with 20 people. So I give this person 2 privates. I give this person a private every day, and it's just too costly. It's too costly.
Yeah. And it would be great if they would have a system in there, just because right now the only education which you get after 12 years, they're giving you classes how to be a professional ref. So that's kind of like in your certification. But if you're going through a curriculum, there is a fake curriculum which you're going through, but it would be great to have, learn the checkpoints, learn all the essential shots. I mean, it could be amazing things done in there. It's a place right on the beach.
We talked about this. With player development, you need time. So I'm young, and I think I'm not young now, but years ago, I'm in Tyler, Texas, started age 26. So I basically there 26 to 36. And going in, having been trained by Welby Van Horn, Dennis Van der Meer, and Vic Braden, I had a pretty good handle on tennis teaching. Plus, I was born into jackocracy and knew a few things about sports. The second 5 years I was there, the small group we had, no more than a dozen kids. And, Jennifer Roberts started one of the players, and Dave Anderson spent the most time with, but, won a national college Division I title, another gal. At one time where they didn't have the 10s, they just had 12s, 14s, 16s, and 18s. So there's only 8 titles to win. At that time, Texas had a population of 17 million people. And our group won 3 titles. We thought we could have won 4. The kid who didn't win, he happened to lose to, I think it was John Roddick. That was the same tournament where he lost to a kid, John Roddick, a year younger. But this kid I'm referring to, he's our original guinea pig, Clayton Stanley. He went on and played at Texas. I was fighting some politics, and one of the reasons I left is I promised myself at this junior college, the second time around, if they didn't hire the person I recommended, they didn't interview the first person I recommended, because I was there during my 10 years in Tyler, Texas, 81, 91. I was there during 3 different college coaches, and it became an immigration center, and they'd won national championships, and you can say positive things about the coaches for sure, but with the second time around, his name's in the news now. We're recording this during the Australian Open. Craig Tiley, recommended Craig Tiley. He wasn't even interviewed, and then he left, and he was director of instruction at Illinois. the coach I recommended, Jennifer Roberts, the first time, she was the women's coach. And then it was just circumstantial that the men's coach was fired, and entirely on an interim basis. Then he, here's the ball, run with it. And then he took the program where they won a national championship. But it's like my mother used to say, she'd visit, I didn't really, okay, you got a really good thing going here. Even though, the Good Old Boy Network and, people were, I went in there and broke a monopoly basically because just, basically one family controlled the town. But during that time, and this is where you could describe Latvian tennis, the setting, and then your connection with, the lead coach with the Billie Jean King team, the former, the Federation Cup team. But when I was in Ireland, married a gal from Ireland, and John Taylor, I thought he was a squash player, but Fergus Rourke's mother told me, and she was a journalist who covered Wimbledon, she said, no, he was a badminton player. No, he asked me to go to Ireland and be the national coach at that time, and I'm thinking, this is the job for me. There's no money. Basically, they're just going to give you a title. There's no money. There was only 2 indoor courts at that time in the entire country. Like, yeah, this is perfect for me. See if you can make something out of nothing. And with, there was another time, a lot of the Canadian coaches that I trained with, Bob Muffett was in charge of Tennis Canada. That was just a conversation. Same thing with Russell Seymour in South Africa. It was just a conversation. But I was offered the job also to be the national coach of Puerto Rico. Phil Eisenberg, who owned the Welby Van Horn camp, and Welby, who was based in Puerto Rico for a long time. And I remember Bob Larson telling me that if you want to be international, you have to get an international job. And I didn't take that. And, you look back and go, it would have worked. It would have worked if you can get a group of people that are motivated, and just like that group in Tyler, Texas. I remember being in Tyler, and the people would say, the kids in Tyler can't compete against the kids in Dallas. And I go, hey, you got it. What's the air different? You can come from a small town. Tennis players come from anywhere. But, actually we went to Memphis with the idea that, if we get everybody on the same page working together, we could take underprivileged kids, work with hungry, like you're saying, hungry kids. But why don't you describe the setting in Latvia? I can talk about the pre-post videos that you did, and it's amazing. Because you ended up being over there quite a bit of time during the pandemic, right?
Yeah.
But just describe that setting and what it costs.
What it costs? Well, the building costs in Latvia are a little bit different than in here. It's much cheaper, but what they build in there, it's, I don't know the numbers, but I think they spent like a 14 million on a new facility, indoor facility. When I was growing up, we only had 7 clay courts.
The whole country or the city?
The whole city. And the city back then, it had like close to 120,000 people. 7 courts, that's it. No indoor courts. So, of course, and again, there were some positives that we went inside the basketball facilities and played on this terrible surface, quick, terrible bounce. But they just built this facility, the new facility, by the city, maybe it would be right now 5 years ago. So it has 5 indoor courts, has classrooms, has a gym. It has even, I would call it a skills development court. So when you're inside, it's a half of the court, what I meant before, a wall. So you can really just work on the technique, and which is great. The kid is not distracted from trying to be on the court and hit balls. He's just right there. Outside, they have, I believe, 6 hard courts, big wall. Right next to it is a big school. It has, going from elementary all the way to high, big track, has volleyball on the sand. So it has, right now it's beach tennis is very popular in Europe, so it's there. Beach is basically right next door. And then you can jog from that facility, indoor facility, to the clay courts. I would say 10-minute jog, and you're there. So everything is there. The school is there. You can start the kids again, even with the PE classes. You can get them in the gym. You can start introducing that to schools. Again, as I mentioned before, I think the system would be to pick the players who are hungry, put them in there. It's a gem in there if it's run right. And then the whole city, actually, it's all funded by the town, by the government. It looks like a Olympic village. We have the indoor pools, we have the indoor tracks, indoor soccer. So if you arrive in a small little city, you're walking around like Olympic village, and because you're in that tennis school, you can use all those facilities. The craziest part to the listeners, this whole the financial structure to this is just only 50 euros a month if you admitted to it. So it's basically you winning a lottery.
50 euros a month. I mean,
50 euros a month, and you're...
tennis parents here are paying for that for half an hour lesson.
Yeah. But again, as you mentioned before, you know, 10, you need 10 years to develop something, and only in the second 5 years.
You know, with memory, I don't know, reflective thought, perhaps a nostalgic mother always telling stories, the power of story. Kevin King is one of the nicest guys on the planet. And, you know, it's one of those things where Kevin's been on TV playing, and some of the kids that we're training go, see that kid right there? He's cleaned toilets here. I remember the day, this guy's a superstar. You know, he's already a fantastic tennis player, and he comes in and, you know, okay, it's Saturday afternoon, we're going to clean this, you know, place with like 6,000 square feet. But he played some doubles in the 18s with my son Connor. You know, he went on to Georgia Tech, was All-American. He had a lot of problems with his hips and operations, and you know, made a go of it in pro tennis. But his father has to be like the nicest guy in build on the planet. So, you know, I remember being at Kalamazoo and going to a restaurant with him the first day, and then like 5 days later, go to the same restaurant with him. You know, hadn't gone out to dinner with him the nights in between. But we go to the restaurant, he knows everybody. Every waiter, busboy, bartender, he knows everybody by name. And anyway, I remember him being emphatic about this beautiful place. You've probably seen it, Cary Park, North Carolina. And he goes, you know, there's an opportunity, you need to go to Cary Park. And then to go there and see how beautiful the facility is. And there's an elementary school over here and a high school over there. And it was just a point in time. I remember where Matt Clore was in between some things, and they say, hey, there's a job in North Carolina, and he loves, that's where he's from, North Carolina. But that's what it sounds like you're describing, but even when you think about indoor and clay courts and...
But then also exposure to other athletes.
Yeah.
Around all of that, there is a soccer guys are coming in and practicing, there is a track and field, so you're around all the athletes. I mean, our town is very athletic. And the culture is there too. I mean, our 4 sports right now is soccer, basketball, hockey, and tennis. And I would even put in there track and field as well. And especially, again, for the kids, someone from a small town, and I'm sure some listeners know Porzingis, he's from our town. Kristaps Porzingis plays for Dallas, and Sevastova, Ostapenko. So, I mean, Ostapenko, her parents are from our town, but she grew up in the capital. But still, it's a small country, Gulbis. Yeah. So I think for the kids, younger kids, I mean, just a lot of young girls are so motivated and hungry again. So the time is now. I mean, Ostapenko, Gulbis just became actually a president.
Yeah, I want to touch upon that with Gulbis, but I want to go back to something that you said is listeners, the parents especially, have your kids be around athletes, other sports. Joe Curtis, great guy in Tampa. He has a tennis background. He played tennis, and I'd have to check with him. Just a couple years ago, we took a group of kids over to play his high school team. One of my sons went to Jesuit, and the tennis team, Jesuits, I mean, beautiful school, beautiful campus, amazing athletic facilities, no tennis courts. But, you know, less than 5 minutes away, there's a public park with 28 courts. But I used to think that was so sad that those Jesuit tennis kids would leave the Jesuit campus and not be around the other athletes. I'm just going, oh, this is so bad. Mm-hmm. This is so bad. But yeah, Gulbis, he's the president, and he did quite well on the ATP Tour. He actually stopped. A great story. Then he picked up a newspaper, stopped at a fairly young age, and he looked at guys that had hung in there, and he goes, I can beat these guys. And he made a comeback.
Yeah, talking about his first title, singles title. It was in Delray Beach.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, I was there that year. And but being a billionaire, I would love to sit down and talk to him. I always talk about how There's a picture with Larry Ellison and Bill Gates. I think they're both top 5, top 10 in the world for wealth, and they're at Indian Wells. Larry Ellison's, fun project. He built Indian Wells. Or I guess Charlie Passerelle, Ray Moore built Indian Wells, but he bought it and improved upon it. But McEnroe was sitting between those two billionaires. I'm thinking, I would love to talk to those guys. I would love to talk to those guys. If they could just fund like that portable backboard, hey, Larry Ellison, why don't you get your name on this, powered by Oracle. Tell us about you. You were over there, and I remember you sending me film, I think it was 4 girls, pre and post. But that's where it's kind of like the FedEx logo. You don't see the arrow, and then I hand those sheets out, and okay, everybody gets a red pen or red crayon, and fill in the red arrow, and once you see it, you'll always see it. But when you show people that have, their whole life in tennis, I know Chris Clore mentioned this is a great line from Moneyball. He was on one of our podcasts. He said, and I don't have this verbatim, but it's amazing how you can be a sport your whole life and know so little about it. It's amazing how you can be in a sport your whole life and know so little about it. I mean, that defines tennis. That just defines tennis. That's where, people who really know Braden, and I know a lot of people I've trained, they don't tell people that I train them. They tell them that Braden trained them. That's not really true. And they embellish their background with Braden. But once you see, you always see it. You see the racket head pull horizontally. You see they have a short hitting zone. But it's confusing because, it's like the women's final from Australia this year. The 2 girls, they're hitting serves at close to 120, and they're both close to 6 feet, if not taller. And it's just, they're great tennis players, but, they could do a few things a little bit better. But I think a lot of times people are too intimidated to talk to, the ATP and the WTA players. But how did that go over? Overall, and you can talk again about Adrian's, what he's doing.
Yeah. Again, the time when I spent, it was during the COVID time. Actually, I was lucky. All the schools were closed, and when I got in there, they were open for like 2 months. And then right before I was leaving, they started closing them again. So I got to spend some time with coaches and do some workshops in there. And everybody was very open. There were some egos, but still everybody was open. And I got to work with 4 girls who were under 12. And I believe 2 of them were in a Latvian team that they're going to compete internationally. And of course, one girl that you saw in the video, she was a pretty big 12-year-old girl, Maria. But the parents, the coaches, they were all open. I filmed all of them. We did the tiebreaker test. We did all 7 essential shots. And we did this whole. I felt a little, it's a little awkward. I had to talk to the coaches first, and I said, I'm gonna show this video. And I showed them first, the coaches, before I showed it to the parents, because I said I'm going to be a lot of things that I'm going to say they're doing wrong. But they understood it after going through a tiebreaker test. They thought the tiebreaker test was such an easy test to pass, and their eyes were going sideways. How they cannot pass this test? So, and that's when they kind of allowed me to film the technique, and that's when we relate one and two together. And then they allowed me to sit down with the parents, with the coaches, and we just went one by one. And they, again, because of COVID, so it helped out. They didn't have any competition, so it was a perfect time. So the first week we actually spent in that skill development court. Just first day, just showing all the drills on the forehand, all volleys. Just, the next day was just ground strokes and underspins and overheads and going over. And at the same time, I shipped backboard in there. One of the backboards, and
that must have been expensive.
It was pretty penny. It was actually cost us more to ship it there than actually it was cost. Actually,
yeah,
but it was worth it. Well worth it.
That's a man of principle, not a man of profit.
Yeah, and at that time we have the DMP going, daily monitoring program. So I told them, you have to do it. If we're gonna do it every day, you have to send me homework. Otherwise, you're not coming to practice. So for all 2 weeks, they were doing that. And I mean, they were athletic girls, so it was so easy to work, and they picked up things so quickly. So you could see after actually a week their pre and post video how much change was there. And of course, after I left, the coach's ego and not understanding, you're just only touching the tip of the iceberg when you're spending like 2 weeks working with the kids. You really need to spend more time. And when they're going back to their usual thing,
and they're going to revert back.
It's just going back to revert back because they just don't know.
That's like someone who's had an operation. Say, for example, they have a cast on their leg, and they take the cast off, and there's the atrophy. Muscle deteriorates in 24 hours, but they take the cast off, and the kid puts their running shoes on and just sprints out the door. I mean, they just don't know how to rehab strokes.
Correct. Yeah, I mean, it's put something to work in there. We were trying to actually get them in here, but this whole COVID, they just kind of put a stop to it.
Go ahead, hold your thought there. With the tiebreaker test, our listeners, if you go to Tennis Intelligence Applied, you can see the tiebreaker test. There's different levels to it. Just talking about Andy Fitzell, how he was so great. He said, just have the guys hit volleys down the line. Because initially we teach people to volley cross court, to teach them strategy. Close in, 130 degrees, potential angle, 2 out of 3, aggressive air margin, da-da-da-da-da. And here is a tiebreaker story. Working with Tennis Ireland, I was told by Dave Anderson, Fergus will work. We got to get a longtime coach now, Aoife Wilson, one of our former students, on our podcast. So she sets it up where I'm in Ireland working with the coaches. And guy raises his hand. And at that time, Human Connects, there's a book out, and one of the 3 styles was command style. So this guy raises his hand, and he goes, "Your command style." And I said, "Oh, well, let me just do something here for a second." And I said, Aoife, our listeners probably heard this story before. But again, reinforcement's important. To hear it again. So I said, Aoife's going to do some footwork drills in the back. So the kids couldn't hear what I was saying. And it was Ireland, and it wasn't number 1, but they had a kid from the 12s, 14s, 16s, 18s, either 1 or 2 in the country, and boys and girls. So there's 8 kids. And I said, I'm going to put these kids through the tiebreaker test. I don't want to hurt their feelings, but these kids can't hit the broadside of a barn. And they're going to miss and miss and miss. I was in at the old place near Paris, Patrick Moneygoulou. I just pulled it off. I said, no. I said, let me show you very quickly. And in a bubble, you can't hear that well. And then the girl on the other side, she was 60 in the world. She'd be able to just tell your name. But there's no way she's going to pass the tiebreaker test. I was cranking out the feed. It's like a tournament ball, like a ball from a Robert Lansdorp. And fair enough, she's going to put a hole in the ground strokes, cross-court deep, same thing. The approach shot, she doesn't play an approach shot. She stops, comes in, just nails it deep. And, then there's no way she's going to hit a volley. I mean, 2 in a row, and then, to go up 1-love, and she's going to have to win the tiebreaker, to hit 14, there's no way. She's going to miss. And, but yeah, go more on that, on the 4 girls. That experience.
Yes.
But it fell through the cracks.
It fell through the cracks, yeah. And just a lot of things, a lot of variables that kind of worked, again, the COVID and me actually being back in States.
But that really comes down to the coaches have to be trained.
Yeah, in the end, it's coaches.
Education.
Yeah, and in the end of actually when I was about to, my last couple of days, I mean, we have a couple, I'm not going to be mentioning any names, but a couple big players, international players, successful players.
From Latvia.
And the coaches, I mean, they all know each other and know the parents, and they would, well, this and this, that's so, you cannot do this. This is what you have to be doing in the volley. And then when you have to be putting a racket against the wall, okay, so it's... No,
for example, I love Roddick. I loved it when Roddick used to say, love him for many reasons, but when he used to say, people, how do you hit your serve? He goes, I don't know. Where now he's on TV, he goes, well, it's on the legs. And all you have to do, listeners, and I don't want to beat up the touring pros, but if you go to YouTube and you listen to touring pros, really great tennis minds, not to belittle them, but from a technical standpoint, and they're in a clinical setting, they're explaining strokes, it's worse than bad. I mean, that's Tracy Austin. She's head and shoulders better. I mean, there's some that it's like, really. I mean, we're talking to people who won Wimbledon, but it's not their fault. It's just society, you know. But also too, no one dares tell them that is not true. That is not true.
So in the way that's it ended up with, you know, I was saying, well, why? I asked this why, and they're like, there is no explanation. This is because, and this is why. There's no.
Yeah, you know,
and that's why I knew it's not going to work out. It's going to fall off the tracks.
And it's, you know, it's field versus fact.
Correct.
You know, it's like the teaching pro who's got a strong continental grip, open rack face, elbow in on the forehand side, and they're hitting with the little ladies at the country club. They go, I never miss my volleys.
Yeah.
I'd never miss. Yeah, that's because you're. You know, what would Vic say? That's because you're hitting with Bertha Finkenbaum. You know, so tell us about Adrian's.
Adrian's.
I added the S.
Yeah, Adrian's.
My Latvian. That's
It's getting better.
That's one name I got right. What a classy guy, easygoing.
Yes, Zguns or Ziguns. That was his nickname when he played for Arkansas.
Never miss, fast, right?
Very fast guy, very athletic guy.
And for our listeners, chilled.
Very chilled.
Chilled. I mean, you were working with one of our players today. I mean, get him to listen to this podcast. The Dark Poet. I mean, he moves well, hits the ball well. He's got just a few minor details, but you know, the dark cloud is there. It's like, I mean, just so stressed out.
Yes. So again, going from his background, I think he could have been an amazing soccer player, but he chose at 14. He played soccer till age 14, and then he chose to stick with tennis because he knew it was individual sport. So he played in NCAA. I think he got a pretty respectful level in college. He after finishing college, he went to play on tour.
But he coaches the Latvian Fed Cup team.
He's right now the head coach for the Latvian Billie Jean Cup team. Correct. That's actually his first game that he went, and actually with a team that was against United States. So it was a pretty back in Portland, I believe, when they played against Latvia. When who just won Australian Open? She just came back from there. Serena Williams was playing in there, and she lost to Sevastova. So actually, it ended up Latvia and United States was 2-2, and they lost in doubles. Yeah, that was a pretty close. And
So he's done that several years now.
Yes.
One thing, he works for the Fernandez family. He came here. We made a film for Layla's sister Bianca, but that's a very difficult job. He's right. You know, it's got NBA egos. He's got to get the players to gel. Correct.
Correct. And he's.
So it's really not so much about forehands and backhands.
Yes, and that's what he talks about. I mean, he can calm somebody down in the tournament for sure. He can let them loosen up a player.
That's good.
Yeah.
No, that's very important. You know, there's teaching, there's coaching. Coaching, we always say teaching is information transfer. Coaching is a human relationship. I've had some fun coaching college players. You see that sitting on the bench with a guy. See that lady? Look up, like 5 rows up. I think she's staring right at me. She's not watching the match. I think she's watching me on the bench just to get him to laugh. I mean, players get so tight.
Yeah, but I remember actually him coming to Happy Lane back then and actually being filmed. His sister didn't get filmed. He got filmed with his sister, with his niece. And I remember after watching his tape, he said, if I would get this tape and saw my serve, I would be still on tour.
Let's come back to that. That's so important with, but you know, I mean, I don't have too many original ideas, but the idea of getting the player to be relaxed on the bench, Joe Montana, with John Candy, late John Candy. So it's like a key play, Super Bowl, you know, a couple of minutes left on the clock and timeout, and Joe Montana, the cool cat, number 16, the 49ers, gets the guy in huddles and you go, hey, look over, there's John Candy. You know, you're in a big stadium. Just go over section F, just go all the way down. And John Candy's watching the game. And, you know, it's pretty much a famous story because it's like, this is what's got in the guy's mind before he's got to play this huge play. He's going, hey, John Candy's watching. But actually what you just said this past week I was introduced to a player, and I remember his name from playing in the Big Ten. And he played against a lot of the guys that played for Tiley, who I worked with, because I used to go up there every Labor Day weekend, and I spent a lot of time working with the players that were at Illinois when he was there. So he's watching, and the person, I said, well, I don't want to sound crazy, but, I said, let me tell you why he lost. Big, guy's just a big guy, physical specimen. But no, when you make a tape for a player, so that's what's going to happen. You could talk about his reaction to that, and then even to this day, what he thinks about it. I mean, he saw that tape, and that, there's a club in Atlanta. Dom Lausick has been talking to us. I met the owner and go, no, you need to film the coaches. And because 70% of supposedly communication is 70% nonverbal, you need to film all the coaches, and they don't have to play, but they got to be able to demonstrate right-handed, left-handed. Mm-hmm. Film everybody. And then you have to get to the point where everybody has to learn to make a videotape. And then it's like, we don't care what you think. We want to know what you know. Do you agree on the ready position? Mm-hmm. Should the racket be centered, or can you let it, be pointing down to your toes? Which one are we can we have some common denominators here and get people on the same page?
Yeah, the most amazing thing from that he said, he played college, D1 school, he went on tour, and he was a very respectable player, of course, prior to that. And that's the first time I recorded all my strokes and break them down like this.
First time, yeah.
First time.
No, during that romance period with college coaches, notorious for telling people, we do this, we do that, we chart, we film, and then you get there, and players seriously can be there for 4 years and not be filmed. One thing to defend the college coaches, there's no excuse for that, but at the same time, they only have 20 hours per week, and they're working with student athletes. I would say we're so far on the outside, but really it's amazing with the connections how we're on the inside. I think parents who think they're on the inside, they're so new to it. Their kids have been playing 5, 6, 7 years, and they're a newbie. And the thing is you're just talking to other newbies. Mm-hmm. Most tennis parents are not talking to other tennis parents like, yes, I played the game, my father, my grandfather. It's not generational. Mm-hmm. I saw Ryder DeHart at this pickleball court, and he spent so much time with us. I mean, initially Tomas Olestead, who I trained, taught him, and then Tomas sent him to me. He was doing video work before I even met him, before he got out of the 12s, and was coaching him into college. And I used to have a tape of, just watching Tennis Channel tonight. Prakash Amritraj, son of Vijay. He was an attacking player, played very well, played at USC. He might have been like 155, 160 in the world, a good tennis player. But I had him on film, and he had beaten DeHart, I believe it was at Kalamazoo. But I had him on film. This is back in the VHS days. I used to, hey, DeHart, rainy day, let's look at this. Watch this guy. This guy beat you. And it was just like forehand side, backhand side. We had him playing what we call a conventional tabletop approach, like a volley with an added follow through, just convention. Mm-hmm. I said, that's a shot we've been teaching you for a decade, and you don't play it. And I said, watch this guy play. He keeps the trajectory low, gets in. You ever heard Jack Kramer, ever Jimmy Connors? With Wally Masur, I don't really know Wally that well, but Wally's a nice guy. He was practicing this place where Dave Anderson and I were. We'll be maybe 2 miles away from that tomorrow. But Wally Masur, I think he went to the quarters every major, and he was working with Gavin Hopper, who was an Australian football player, who became a fitness coach. But he was really kind of masquerading at that time, perhaps all these years later. But at that time, he was just new to tennis. You could tell by watching him feed a ball. But he asked me, he saw all the video work we're doing. He said, would you look at Wally? And I wasn't really paying any attention, except for I was saying, hey, guys, you have this court. The juniors are going to come by. We're going to have lunch under the trees. And we're putting on this court because I remember Gavin Hopper saying, you can eat well if you just have a healthy sandwich. And he's really into fitness. And these guys were knocking off 5-minute miles. But it was a year where Wally Masur had to go over to Germany, come back. He just flew over, played a Bundesliga match, but at that time, big money, $20,000. So, he had, he said, well, can you look at his forehand? I said, yeah. And I said, oh, that's too bad. Don't tell him. But he resets his forehand. He takes the racket low twice. And it was a Freudian slip. Gavin, who's been training with him for like 3.5 years, he said, "Oh." I said, "No, just watch his racket. Just watch his racket." So he takes the racket down and back up. It's like, how do you pronounce his name? Alex Dimonor? Dimonor. Hewitt has a reset backhand. Dimonor has a reset backhand. Hewitt's kid has a reset backhand. It's not that it's wrong, but then even though you can learn so much, I mean, Hewitt, I love Hewitt, but I don't think they know. I don't think they know the racket goes low twice. It goes down, goes back up, goes down a second time. Because there's so much, that's their style. But actually at the same time, Amos Mansdorf, the top Israeli, he had some big wins like over Edberg. And I believe Mansdorf and Masur are both top 20 in the world. But I've made a lot of videos. And that's where over the years I told people that I should have done this. You should have taken notes all the way along a journal. My memory is going to fade. I have to go back and write some of these things down. That's one thing that's very good about these podcasts. But I didn't show the tape to the players. There's many people I've filmed that are on the tour, but the tour coach will let me look at it. I don't want to complicate it. I don't want to get in their head. And then, really, can they translate it? I say, no, just turn for a volley, hold it, and go from there. Just turn like a volley, just, boom. And then you say, why do you think so-and-so is so good on the return? But I think that's very powerful but also too, it lets you know someone's ego. And I do think that teaching pros are more combative than touring pros. Touring pros, I would say, are more at ease. They're more happy in their own skin. But teaching pros too many times, they're too egotistical. And also too, the macho male ego, if they've been teaching and they find out they've been teaching the wrong way for a long time, I've been through that. I remember being, part of what Vic was doing for a long time. People, they'd raise their hand and go, "I've been telling everybody to do it this way. What do I do now?" He goes, "You just have to go home and you have to tell them, I found a better way." Honesty is the best policy. Yeah. Obviously they're going to do that in medicine. They're going to do that in all forms of technology. If you find a better way. Let me ask you, talk about DMP. We have our nonprofit now. I came up with this idea, and you have the technological skills. You put it out there. We called it back. We put it out again. Tell the listeners. We have some people that still do it.
Yeah.
Why don't you just explain what that is?
DMP. Again, so it's a social. It's not a social media. It's just like the players that's connected to the coach, and basically it's a homework that I've been telling students for. I'm sure you've been telling forever since the phones and cameras came out. With a tripod, record yourself, send it to the coach. So it's just it teaches a discipline. It teaches your responsibility, and then you just uploading it online. I know that we changed the format so many times. At first, I know that the students complained a little bit. It was too long of a task in the beginning. Then we simplified it a little bit. Just became 48-second drill and just a push-up or a sit-up. So you're just recording a simple exercise and you're putting it online, and you just have to do it every day. And the amazing part of it is it's almost like your journal. It's if it stays long enough, you can go off to 10 years later and you can see like how many times the student did that. What is their discipline? What is their responsibility? What is their hunger? Going back to the same word. One thing what was amazing, and I know that there was a lot of a great response from coaches that were saying that the students who did DMP, that they improved much more. Even the students, especially it happened during the COVID time, the kids who didn't have enough lessons, didn't have actually a lot of lessons in the club, but they were doing the same things, and they were actually on that DMP, you could see other kids how they're doing it. So you kind of have this automatic coach. You could see right away, see other kids doing it, and at the same time, you feel like you're part of something bigger. Let's say you're we're in Lake Nona, and we have like a small group of 7 kids, and you're going to DMP, and you see 40 kids out there doing it from all around the world. So you're feeling again, part of something bigger, and you want to do your best because everybody can see what you're doing. So you're not just going through the motions, you're actually doing the right.
Yeah, DMP, Daily Monitoring Program, is free.
Yeah.
The one thing that did happen, two things on the negative side. First is the pandemic, is that coaches, then they were trying to make a living teaching remotely. Mm-hmm. So it's like, okay, we need to back off, and coaches are not even, they can't even go to work, and they were, doing things from their app and this and that. But the other thing too is that we wanted the older players to be role models. Mm-hmm. We did have this idea of, okay, let's do this, let's do that. And then we scaled it down to the point where you can just do it in minutes. Steve Roberts, a young guy, great tennis teacher. You can tell by the way students hit the ball. I loved what he was doing is that you couldn't practice. Mm-hmm. Like you said about, Latvian tennis, make them hungry, make them responsible. Mm-hmm. If they didn't do the DMP, but we need to come back to that. I should be able to say, now time for a commercial break. Our sponsorship, we are a nonprofit, and what we're trying to do with our nonprofit is do a better job giving out free content. But let me have this be our commercial. You could go to our Facebook page, GreatBase Tennis, Facebook, and you can see where you can make a donation to what we do. But Dave Anderson sent this to me. Maybe Sampras turned him down. But it's Andy Roddick, John McEnroe, Andre Agassi, and Michael Chang. They're going to play an exhibition match for $1 million, and it's pickleball. It's pickleball. All our listeners, what we need to do is we need to embrace pickleball and go, okay, learn tennis skills. And okay, this is a little bit different, that's a little bit different, but learn tennis skills. The best players are tennis players. And if you wanted to say, okay, I'm just going to play pickleball all day long, then you can become really, really good at it. You're not going to just play occasionally as a tennis player. I mean, I think that, it's already been proven that somebody picked the racket up for the first time and beat the highly ranked pickleball players. But that's one thing we need to do is we need to embrace pickleball because it's here to stay at this point. I mean, it's growing and growing leaps and bounds. With let's do this. Let's talk a little bit about the Aussie Open. Have you had a chance to watch any of it? By the time this podcast is published, posted, it'll be over. But have you had a chance to watch much?
The Australian Open is it's bits and pieces. Mostly it's been just highlights. It's been tough.
The
time.
I know it's we're going to bed here soon to get up and watch the men's final. We can talk a little bit about that, but I did the same thing with the women's final. Went to bed 8:00. Okay, I'm going to get up. I'm going to watch this, and not fall asleep. But like say Korda, for example, that's a win for tennis teaching. Mm-hmm. If people were to watch Korda play, he has a great pace. I think of Mackenzie McDonald. He didn't really have a great turn after Nadal. Mm-hmm. And there's somebody who you can just tell. You should be able to see it. Like I say, J.J. Wolf. And J.J. Wolf, the circular swings, and he, texting back and forth with Andy Fitzel. Spent a lot of time with J.J. I was there when they started. He had palm up serve. And, I'd say J.J. has the it thing. I mean, he's okay with anxiety. He's not climbing the fence. Very good competitor, and the good stock the family comes from. But yeah, certainly you could have volleyed more. But I'm disappointed with. I know kids are busy, but now the phone, it's the telephone's like, I don't know, 1,000+ TV stations. Is they don't watch tennis. Mm-hmm. Now, the women's final. People are looking at me like I'm crazy. Billie Jean King's there. She hands out the trophy. Now, I saw her play Wimbledon, and Arthur Ashe used to call her the old lady. In all fairness to the two finalists, from the service line in, Billie Jean King is so much better than those girls. Those girls don't play from the service line in. And, that's coming back to what you said earlier, is that will someone speak up and say, hey, how many times did you serve and volley? How many times did you take a second serve? How many overheads did you play? But with the Aussie Open, people are going to listen to this after the fact, but Tsitsipas, he's won twice. He hasn't beat. He's played him 12 times. 10-2 for Djokovic. What's he have to do to win that match? What's he have to do to win that match? I mean, what comes to your mind?
Again, this was talking about numbers. Coming in more, and closing in the point again. The numbers, if the numbers winning in the net are higher, you have to come in more. So again, which number is going to be higher, which number is going to be lower? You want your number coming into the net higher, not lower.
It's like Braden used to say about board velots. How many times can you lose to the player the same way? I was at the Easter Bowl with Vic one time, and he goes, well, if you're playing somebody who's a little better from the baseline, you might as well just mail in the scores. You have no options. You have no options. But the parents listening, teaching pros, players, you have to start early. It's very safe to say, okay, the kid's played the last 5 years. He played doubles the wrong way, one up, one back, and he hasn't served and volleyed one time. He's won matches, or she's won matches 6-love, 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 6-1, bagels and breadsticks. With Bill Jacobson, people go back, and we talked about with these podcasts to go back and just take one topic. He used to share the data for ideally what do you want a player to do in the 18s. And if they would win 35% through forcing, then they want to be less than 10% with unforced errors. And people don't really even give themselves a chance to hit a volley, forehand, backhand, hit an approach volley. You'll see the occasional swing volley. Big time matches, no overhead. But no, I think that Tsitsipas, just like in 12 and unders, and if he throws the ball up a little bit higher, and he can loop on both sides. I mean, it's amazing what he does with his one-hander. Stay more in the pocket. Don't put yourself out of the pocket and hit high. And is Djokovic, and people say greatest player of all time. If he's going for 22 tomorrow, is that right? And, say he's going to, he's 35 and he's going to play 5 more years. I mean, I don't think he's, going to be short of, say, a Tom Brady. He could play 10 more years. The way he's taking care of his body, his flexibility, his nutrition. But I think that you have to say, okay, even though he's up 2 sets to love at the French, I think the big 3, and poor Andy Roddick, his record should be the big 4. Especially, hats off to Andy Roddick, what he did at the Australian Open this year. And, people look at his record against the top guys. It's amazing. But the thing is that taking 3 sets from Djokovic, one thing to take 2, another thing to take 3. And I think if junior players, college players, you say, okay, you're going to lose this match, but we're going to look at the numbers and you're going to do what you're told to do. And, the football coaches, the hockey coaches, the systematic, this is what we're going to do. And instead of go with what you got, go with what you got. No, Tommy Paul came out and said, well, I heard Brad Stein talking about how he's had problems with his elbow and he can't even practice his serve. What a great athlete, what a great run. But he said, I just couldn't serve and volley. Well, you could. You might have lost worse, but the thing is that a Tommy Paul, he didn't do that when he was younger. And so we don't want to sound like we're critical of the pros. It's not like we're saying, okay, the pros need to change this or change that, but we need to learn from the pros. I remember telling Paul Roeder when he was in charge of player development at the USTA is that, we don't want the Sam Querreys of the future. Not to take anything away from Sam, but when you're that big and you serve that big, really just staying back and looking to crack a forehand, and playing 1-up, 1-back doubles. But I think that going back to Roger Federer, the article I wrote years ago, Dear Mr. Roger Federer, Sir. And you can't just go by stats. But he's playing the French, and I believe these numbers are accurate, loses to Nadal, and he goes in 17% of the time, and he wins 73. Well, you need to go in more and win less. And, and actually it was one time where Mats Wilander, was one of those guys I'm referring to when you watch him explain strokes, but, great tennis mind, great tennis player. But, not someone to really explain to you how to hit a forehand and backhand. And one of the French Open finals, Federer won 6-love in the first set. And, Wilander made negative comments and said it was just a bad set for Nadal. And he said even though he won 6-love, if people, they took a soundbite from it and it just came across that Wilander was being very negative about Federer. But if people listened to the whole thing, he was singing his praises like, really, really off the charts. Like, this is a guy I want to watch. This guy is the best. This guy's movement, da-da-da-da-da. But I think a lot of times people are afraid to criticize the best. And the commentators on TV, many of them are looking for a job. They're gonna leave the booth if they can coach one of those marquee players. And I just think that there's a little too much sucking up and being too nice to the players on the tour. And it's not a matter of, they are warriors and they are specimens, but yet I don't think in this country, I don't think the American public's really learning much about tennis, when, technically, tactically, when they watch matches. I agree. I got one last thing. We can talk to you forever, but the frustrations in working, let's come back to it. We've talked about it. The frustrations in working with U.S. juniors. You and I we've spent a lot of time, as you said, maybe it's 5 years collectively, but if I've known you 7, time goes by fast. Creating a tennis culture. For me, like right now, we're not doing squad training. You and I were at an elementary school today, and I tell people, I think I could be an athletic director at an elementary school now. We're going to teach everybody to throw left-handed, right-handed. Everybody's going to be able to dribble a basketball, soccer ball. Everybody's going to be able to run with great technique. You could even say, okay, golf. We're going to get everybody where they can just hit a golf ball on balance, hit a tennis ball on balance, and start early. Mm-hmm. You have to, Dennis Vandermeer, you'd have to work with trickery. It's got to be a fun thing. But to convince the parents that recreation need to go recreate. They need to get outside and get the air going through their lungs, and they got to get off they can't be electronically connected. But just some frustrations, or a perfect setting. I know you and your brother are talking about you'd love to get together and just be in a setting where you're working with athletes. Why don't you expand upon that a little bit?
Again, it's just perfect world. It would be great to have a school, I would say, a place, a school where you would have a number of sports. And again, my brother's background is in hockey, and right now he's a PhD in physical therapy. And again, it's a talk of its own about physical therapy and where. But again, frustration with the athletes, nowadays athletes, again, talking about the base exposure. I think every athlete, and the parents don't know when they're putting a kid in any sport, it's the first sport just have to be gymnastic. It's just a must. And if you're coming into, let's say, a school, you pick up a gymnastics 3 times a week, and 2 times a week you pick another sport. Like, you're coming to school, and I'm your advisor, and I'm going to tell you, okay, this is what you need to do. This is your first 2 years. Gymnastics, no way around it. You have to do it. Gymnastics 101, gymnastics 102. Next, the 3rd year, it's going to be track. And those are the base sports. And then in the middle of them, you can pick your own sport that you like. Maybe in the end, you're going to like gymnastics. Maybe then you're going to like track. But mix it in with sports like soccer, just basic soccer, football, hockey, tennis, basketball. And And then I think the player needs to choose their own sport. If when they have a base and exposure to different sports, but then it just comes down to a pure honesty, what you really want to play, what you really love, because that's only then you can build your character. If you don't really love the sport that you play, the work is going to be, I mean, the sacrifice and suffering, those are great words if you love the sport. If you don't love what you do, those suffering and sacrifice is just, it's also become, those two words go into a bad pile. So you don't really learn something from it. So you have to be really, go to that with a pure honesty, not because of your parents want to do some sport, but because you want to do it. And you will give everything. You're going to go through broken glass to continue doing the sport or whatever you want to do. But if you have a base, again, that you started as in gymnastics and you have a track and field and you export to a team sport and then you expose to the individual sport, you know how to navigate. So that would be, and of course, somebody with a PhD in physical therapy having a great alphabet how to build an athlete. Because right now I think that the players, everyone is so specified in one sport. And again, as we mentioned before, there's no pickup games. So if you're playing, for example, there's a number of problems. Like some of the students that I'm teaching right now, tell them, okay, right now we're practicing 3 times a week. In those 2 times a week, go pick up another sport, develop skills, and it's tough because either you cannot go into a competitive sport. If you want to go to soccer, they want to sign you up for the 3 months, or you have to be belong to this. You cannot do anything else. So, but if you have the school, you would have this ability and under one roof to do those pickup games, and at the same time play your sport. So and you would have an exposure, and I think you would be an all-around athlete. But so that's an idea, just to go by this, and every sport would go just 101, 102, just like in tennis, we can go tennis 101, tennis 102, and exposed to different layers.
You used a term earlier with your aunt was a master gymnast?
Master of sports, and it goes to gymnast. So you're.
What would define in the Soviet system? I remember hearing that so many times. Master.
Right now, I cannot answer. I know you're going through. I believe it goes through how many years you've been doing it, and then the competition. Again, I cannot really tell you that.
It may vary from sport to sport. Again,
Yeah.
I've mentioned my oldest brother a few times on this podcast, where he got a PhD in Russian studies, studied Russian hockey, and started studying hockey. And I think, I'll study tennis. Very common in Moscow. I can't really say I've been to Russia, but I've only been to Moscow. I've been to Moscow, several times, and here and there. And it's almost like every indoor facility has one tennis court, 72 square feet. It's just equipment for gymnastics. Like, this is where you go to work on becoming an athlete. The Wimbledon champion passed away at such a young age, Yana Novotna. Her mother used to take her to gymnastics, and then one day her father took her, and the father's very tall, and they said, you have to change sports. Mm-hmm. So I think that's one thing too, is that it's not a matter of just collecting money. I remember having a young girl come to see me, and her dad was a very, very good football player, got drafted in the NFL, played linebacker next to Lawrence Taylor, North Carolina. And I remember saying, I really think the softball, she was very good at, loved both, but if it was my call. I do think that people choose too early too. I know, like, say my sons, they were playing hockey, and I didn't even understand this. They played for Little Caesars, which out of Detroit, this record may not stand anymore, but they put more Americans in the NHL than any other junior program. So they were playing for Little Caesars. And for me, it was like, well, they said they got to the point where they didn't want to play. It was really 11 months out of the year. Mm-hmm. They're playing hockey, and they both, especially the older ones, said, hey, you wanted to play tennis. But also, too, it was survival. It was, how do you keep 2 kids in ice hockey when you're making your living coaching tennis? Mm-hmm. You got one kid going left and one kid going right. This is just one thought with Niednagel. The title of his book, John Nagel, Brain Typing, he changed the title because it was Choose Your Best Sport. But by the time people are reading the book, they've already chosen their best sport. Mm-hmm. And they find out they're really not wired the best for that particular sport. with, when soccer first came out in the U.S., and again, when I was a kid, we'd cover it in PE class, but nobody knew how to play soccer. Boston, St. Louis, a few places in the U.S. But then all of a sudden it was 12 months of soccer. Some tennis parents would really do themselves a favor. They would say, no, we're only playing tennis 8 months out of the year. This is what we're doing in these 4 months. And don't worry about points, and don't worry about nationals. Don't worry, well, you get into this tournament, you get in that tournament. Just forget that. There will always be tournaments. And all you have to do is to get up the ladder is to win. So Casey Curtis covered that in one of these podcasts. It's just about skills. We have somebody coming here. We've had this happen before, but just a couple times. We have a girl coming who has to, and you can do this in college. You can choose between tennis and rodeo. Mm-hmm. And I remember having a girl from New Mexico come many years ago. Great hockey player by the name of Shane Doan. He's got, I think, 3 older brothers, and he didn't play, or he didn't become a cowboy. He didn't do rodeo. And they asked him why. He said, and he was known to be a really tough hockey player. He goes, I wasn't tough enough. I mean, again, you think, okay, I'm going to jump off this horse, and some sports. I had a dad. There's so many Indian kids in the U.S. now. Mother and father, IT, and they have the academic skills, and they come and they, contribute to American society. And it seems like they're just signing up for tennis. I one time was in Dallas, and it was 24 kids. They were all Indians. Mm-hmm. But I had an Indian dad say, my kid's a house cat. And you get your kid's got to become a street cat. And, if your kid's coming to practice and he's drinking coconut milk, they don't know how to make a peanut butter sandwich. Here's one thing. I know Willie Schutte used to work with me, and Coffee with Willie, great social skills. But he got out of tennis. Now I believe you would say he's a financial advisor. So we make these videos. I was telling this story not too long ago. So training a staff, everybody's got to learn to make narrated slow motion analysis. Well, and I think, and my philosophy. No. Your backswing's too big. Your racket's not getting below the ball. You have a short hitting zone. Mm-hmm. You're too crowded when you hit the ball. Your left shoulder disappears. Your head shifts on and on and on. So when you make these videos, you got to make sure the camera's off. So this film goes to a family. And it's at the end, and 3 parts to it: preliminary strokes with, watching your essential strokes in regular speed, preliminary information. The second part is narrated slow motion analysis. Mm-hmm. The third part, you get in front of the camera and, the do's and don'ts, the classroom review. So Willie, he doesn't check the tape, but he doesn't turn the machine off. The tape basically ends. There is no way that this kid will ever change his strokes. This kid is so soft. This kid is so spoiled. So, and it might have been a little more colorful how he said this. So the tape goes to the family. So I have a meeting. They want to talk to me. They're mm-hmm. upset about what the coach said. So I said, well, no, we all make mistakes, and okay, he shouldn't have put that on the tape. And it's okay, we apologize professionally, okay. But I said, now there's another part to this meeting. I said, he's right. He's right. Most young people changing technique, I tell them this is most likely, the most difficult thing that you've ever done. Mm-hmm. Maybe some kid, he's trying to conquer dyslexia, or some kid, where, he's the grandmother, in bad health, the grandfather passed away, and, the grandmother's living in the home and her health is bad. You just don't know what goes on, but it's a pretty safe bet that, trying to change your technique, some kid's 11 years old, and basically they just have their schoolwork and their extracurricular pursuit. They don't have all the variables and all the challenges the parents have. I guess mortgage in French means death grip. I heard Braden one time say, a 4-year-old laughs something like 400 times a day, and a 40-year-old laughs 4 times a day. So, but making changes with technique. But no, with what you do, your skill set, there's so many things we come back and talk about. The physical part. So you're an athlete. All somebody's got to do is look at the size of your legs. And with that, how many players, just give me a percent of all the players that you and I have worked with, not to make anybody feel bad, what percent would you say physically were not beginners? Like, okay, can you do some push-ups? Can you do some sit-ups? Can you do a great job, you could do a great job teaching people how to do double jumps. What percentage would you say are beginners when it comes to fitness?
I mean, we're not going to be in double digits. I mean, it's going to be very small. We're not.
The ones that are
not athletes. They cannot do push-ups. I mean, how many kids are going to?
No, I mean, I'd start at 90. 90% of the kids.
Well, we're going,
go the other way.
Yeah, the other way.
So 10%.
The Latvian math.
10%. It's like, listeners, get on YouTube, just put in JFK physical fitness, and watch what young kids were doing in PE classes. It was chauvinistic. It was sexist. The girls weren't pushed like the boys in PE classes. Girls push-ups. I mean, no, there's no such thing as a girls push-up. You're on your knees, and certainly if someone's a beginner, it's not whether, well, no, that's for girls and this is for boys. Thank the good Lord we're past that. But
I mean, just even one test. When you tell how many push-ups can you do in a minute, I mean, the people's eyes just going 1 minute of push-ups. I just remember doing that in school, and like first, second grade, this is what you do. This is like beginning of school. That's what you have to do.
But if you do it on an everyday basis, if you pop out of bed and do some push-ups, you do Steve Robertson, you do one push-up, you grow muscle. I love that line. But no, kids can't do leg lifts. Just keep your legs straight, 6 inches off the ground, and their body's just quivering, just shaking. And one of the reasons is that physical trainers are too nice. I tell kids all the time, your physical trainer may be outstanding, but they need to be fired. So I think you're not, that comedian Jeff Foxworthy, I remember I wrote an article on that. He did this saying, you're a redneck if you can look out of the corner of your eye and watch ESPN during the time they're reading your wedding vows, you're a redneck. But with this article was a flip around and said, you're not a tennis player if you can't skip rope. Mm-hmm. You're not a tennis player if you can't string rackets. If a kid's been in the game a long time, the parents, I find that the parents get a stringer, but then the parents string the racket because the kids they got homework, and the academic work is tough. Last thing though, you would be considered Eastern European.
Yes.
Okay, so you hear this all the time. They're Eastern European. Why so many successful tennis players from Eastern Europe? And it wasn't really pushed in the Soviet system because it was an Olympic sport. Former Yugoslavia, former Czechoslovakia, there's certain places behind the Iron Curtain where tennis didn't die. What do you, when people say, well, the Eastern Europeans are doing so well, and they are?
Well, it comes down to hunger, again, coming from there, just knowing myself going from Latvia and going to United to get to a school is just hungrier to get there. Culture, I would say that too as well. Eastern European culture is a little bit tougher. I would just
hungry.
Just hungry. I mean, it's in the end, it's just
desire.
Desire, and it's a culture. You just grew up. I mean, Eastern European. I mean, I was born in '84. It's been so much upside down from like when I was growing up, and you're just learning how to deal with in your daily life. You're looking at your parents, what they're dealing with, your grandparents. I mean, you have all the stories, so you just born into it. So you're
prepared.
You have a little bit edge on it. I mean, it's again, I didn't grow up in here, so I cannot really say. But now being in here, I know you mentioned a couple of times that I got Americanized a little bit, and I see that. I mean, I have a dog. Again, I'm number 2 in my dog's world, number 2 in my wife's world. But it makes it a little bit easier in there. But just going softer, I would say. But Again, I cannot talk for everybody else, but I would say that's number
Yeah.
one, just kind of growing up in that
Well, you know,
mentality.
Dad watching you work today, loved it. He's a college quarterback. You just think of these college quarterbacks practicing taking a snap, taking the crossover steps, you know, having the left hand on the ball. It looked exactly like you do hitting an overhead.
Mm-hmm.
You tell a group of tennis kids, okay, touch the net. And by the way, we don't let kids hit the top of the net because the top of the net's made of plastic. Don't come up and bang the net. Just touch the middle of the net and then use crossover steps, not shuffle steps. You'll get body rotation, half the steps, cover twice the distance. And like you said, you know, they're switched on. They're not switched on. But the quarterback's saying, I want to make the varsity. I want to be on the JV. I don't want to get cut. Mm-hmm. And they're like, you know, awareness, acceptance, commitment. Okay, I accept this is what we have to do. The coach is in charge. And they're not, well, I don't like that. I don't like this. But I told the dad when he was watching you work, I said, you know, and same thing with myself, is that so many people in tennis would laugh at what they see you're doing. Like, oh, that's all wrong. No one does that. The pros don't play that way. And it's like, well, come on back in a few months and watch like where these beginners are and see where this is going. Mm-hmm. And, you know, if someone really gets a good handle on the work that we've compiled, it's very difficult to work someplace where there's not quality tennis instruction. I mean, it's very, very difficult. Mm-hmm. And I mean, that's one of the things I'll sign off, but I mean, you can sign off after I do. But I think, you know, so why are you doing this? Why do you want to, you know, share this information from tennis teachers from the past? Is because when I put my head on the pillow, peace of mind is I don't want to think I, you know, robbed anybody of money and time. You know, like how can you look a kid in the eye and you know you're making it up? You know you're just making it up. And, you know, you think about prevention of injury. I mean, lost time. You know, a kid practices the wrong thing for several years. I mean, it's just so difficult to undo what's been done. But yeah, we'll have to get you on again. I mean, we could take one topic. But I would say with Tsitsipas, the SRRTC, serving, got to have a great day serving. He's got to have a great day returning. And he's got to have a great day rallying. You know, they got to do well with the rallying. The transition, he's got to increase that. Approach shots going forward, and then he's got to be able to do the math at the net. He's got to be able to close.
He just has to have a great day.
Well, yeah, and fair enough. He's got to be at his best. But I mean, whoever wins the match ends up being number one in the world. Yeah. And you know, one thing with Tsitsipas, a coach who resides in Columbus, he's listening to these podcasts. We had several conversations where he wanted to come and hang out. He follows what we do. He's 4 years older than Tsitsipas. Grew up in Greece, and he said the two of us were taught out of Vic Braden's book. And you could see it. I think he's improved his toss. I don't think it's full. Excuse me. I'm saying excuse me to the microphone. Is that I don't think he has the wandering toss. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, you know, 10 U.S. Open, or excuse me, 10 Aussies, is that when you think about a Vilas playing Borg, like Braden, you're going to play the same way 20 times in a row. You're 0-20, and it's like, okay, I'm going to play differently. And yeah, I do think that he needs to step it up and be, you know, Jim Lair at the end of the point. Did you play aggressive percentage tennis? But great to have you on as a guest. Thanks. Tell me, what's your closing comment here?
Well, again, just want to thank you for having this opportunity and be part of this, which is 130th podcast. Well, the time goes so fast.
130, yeah.
130. You
know, with that, we need to go back, and with our nonprofit efforts, some people can't donate money, but they could donate time, and to go back with the podcast and write down show notes and just excerpts from them. You know, we do have a number of Instagram posts that are, I guess, 1 minute long, and we need to go back and you know, keep working with those type of lessons. But we've had many people tell us they like the format. We only do one per week, and I'd like to think that there's, as I say all the time in the write-ups, or I write in the write-ups, add this to your tennis treasure chest.
Yeah.
You know?
No.
But 130, I mean, I know we have some students that they should have just started day one, and now they're so far behind. We tell people, that we're coaching, your parents are investing all this money, and you don't study the content. You don't study the content. You're part-time in our program. To be full-time in our program, take care of your schoolwork first. This is for goal-oriented juniors. I mean, we have a junior here now who's been here many times over the last 5 years. You know him, you've worked with him. And at the Summer Nationals, I told the player and the mother, I said, I really can't even have a conversation with your kid. He doesn't know. I asked him down the line 78, cross courts 82 and a half, and 130. And I need to go back to my Braden book. Mike McLaughlin was a guest on our podcast on tennis intelligence applied. It was never corrected, but we say that the angle is 30 degrees from the service line. Mm-hmm. Dave Anderson sent me a clip, does a fantastic job. And he says 30 degrees. It's 30 degrees from 10 and a half feet. Mm-hmm. And I go, let me go back and check that. And, do you have to really know the numbers that exact? Well, yeah, if you're going to be an educator, okay, fine, I don't want to misinform anyone. But you got to be in the ballpark. Obviously Anderson is so far in. He's been working this system for maybe 40 years now, 35, 37 years. And actually for the listeners, like say with a Braden study, if you really study Braden, you can learn more. I think I spent so much time with Vic, but if you start working what he put together, you don't have to be working with Vic. You don't have to be working with Vic. He said, no, I've got a really good handle on this. And the more you are around it, the light bulb goes off, and it's like, okay, a higher and higher level of understanding.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Again, talking about the layers. I mean, watching GreatBase Intelligence applied once, second time, third time. It's like watching a movie, part 1, part 2, part 3, opening up new things. Every time you're watching it, you're understanding it from a different angle. Because first time when you're watching it, it's a lot of things that's just passing you by.
Cole Reeves, who was a guest on the podcast, says, we need tennis intelligence applied 2.0. The content won't change. Mm-hmm. A coach I've known for a long time, he was visiting, and he said, no, you need some more creative information. And I said, no. No, you can be creative with teaching aids and how you go about things, but no, you're not going to reinvent the wheel. That's the ego. Yeah. That's the ego. Anyway, Ilja, say your last name one more time.
Was it Semjonovs? I got to remember it now.
Yeah, we did talk about having one of these a three-way. We need to get your brother on and his area of expertise with the human body. Well, let's do that.
Yeah, that'll be great.
But listeners, adios amigos. Ilja, everyone, thanks for listening. Wave to the camera.
Yeah.
And plus, he's got his colors on. Those are Latvian colors. Gotta love it. Gotta love it.
It's ready.
I should go to Latvia and teach tennis.
We have to go there.
No, I mean, it'd be nice. I'm heading towards 70. I hope I can make it there. But that sounds like a job I should go do for 10 years because you need that type of setting. You got to go in and fight battles.
Yeah.
You got to go in and fight battles. But people need to hang around. There's no quick fix and hang around. Okay, and that's how you can have success.
Yeah.
All right. Good night, everybody.
All right.
1:30.